Welcome to the Happy Mama Movement podcast. I'm Amy Taylor-Kabbaz, mama, journalist, coach, and founder of Mama Rising. This podcast is a space of community and collaboration. We gather stories of matrescence, motherhood, womanhood, and change told by our Mama Rising coaches and mothers around the globe, in the knowing that through our stories, we can begin to heal and change the way the world sees, values, and supports mothers everywhere. So, welcome to the Happy Mama Movement. Welcome back, everybody. If you haven't already, take a moment to listen to last week's episode before this one. Last week, I interviewed Jerry McVean from the Fatherhood here in Australia, who is really passionate about going into workplaces and corporate to talk about fathers, fatherhood, and making fatherhood more visible and supporting fathers differently. Because that conversation really is a great precursor for the conversation you're about to hear with my beautiful friend, Paula Maidens. In this conversation, we talk about the reality of work-life balance for mothers and how unhealthy it can be when we don't really acknowledge what it takes to find balance in our lives. What she points out is it's different for each and every one of us, of course, when we have little ones. What balance looks like for you will look differently than for me. But what I love about this conversation with Paula, who is a mama of 2 boys herself and has been a business consultant for over 14 years, has created numerous businesses of her own, and now helps entrepreneurs and businesses build high-performing teams. So she really is in the day-to-day running of businesses, of being a businesswoman, of being a mother in workplaces. What she talks about in our interview is how we need to continuously audit our time and our lives to see what balance looks like. And whether that means tweaking the hours at home or tweaking the hours at work, how we make that work for ourselves. Because real balance is possible, but only if we're really conscious about what balance looks like and not trying to pretend to just do it all. I know you'll love this interview, and please let us know afterwards what you thought and what real balance looks like for you. Enjoy. Paula, my beautiful friend, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this chat.
I am too. You've actually done a couple of masterclasses and trainings in Mama Rising over the years. So some of my diehard listeners who are Mama Rising coaches will recognize your face and your wisdom. But today I wanted you to come in and speak to us all, whether you're in a business, whether you're working, whether you're a stay-at-home mum, about this idea of work-life balance as mothers and as women. I know you and I can get quite ranty and excited about this. This is going to be an awesome conversation.
Absolutely. Ranting aloud, right?
That's right. That's what it should be. The Rant of Motherhood is the new name of my podcast. So you are a mama of 2 boys who are currently 3 and 7, nearly 4. I've known you for a long time. We were just reminiscing about you being pregnant with Bo, who's nearly 4, this beautiful big belly on the couch as we were away on mastermind weekends for building our business. So you've had a lot of your own experience of running businesses, being within companies, helping others, hire and manage teams, and then also now do it for yourself with your 2 boys. So if I was to just first of all say to you, when you hear the concept of work-life balance and how we should be striving for work-life balance as working mothers, what's your immediate response to that? What comes to mind?
Well, I think it's incredibly important. In fact, I think it's imperative if you want to actually live a life, by design, and a life that feels good, as opposed to sort of waking up in 3, 4, 5, 10 years time and looking back, wishing it had been different. So I know I've worked for myself for 14 years, and in those 14 years, I've started 3 businesses. So I've been in that, crazy, chaotic startup phase quite a few times. And before I started my own businesses, I had quite a big corporate career. So, for me, work-life balance has always been hugely challenging. And certainly, particularly in my younger years when I didn't have commitments of families and even husbands and, things like that, my default was just to work myself silly, prioritize that and deprioritize me, which, I'm sure for everybody listening is common. But that reality or that way of working, that default had to change, for it to be sustainable. Because certainly, in my corporate career, what I've realized now in hindsight is that I sort of used to burn out in my jobs after about 3 to 4 years. And I thought getting a new job would fix that. But I found myself back there again.
Yes.
And then when I started my own businesses, I woke up from my first business 4 years in, and I'd hated the environment and the way of working that I'd built for myself. And suddenly I could only look in the mirror and blame myself, because I was like, well, you're the boss. Act like one. If this doesn't feel great, you have the power to change it. So, and that's one of my, I guess my big philosophies in life is this ability to choose. And, you can't always see it. It's not always the funnest thing to face, but actually, if something doesn't feel good, there's always choice.
And I think for so many of us, this is the crash landing into motherhood and work that we find ourselves in, because like you said, there is a luxury, I guess. There is the ability to not have much balance before motherhood, because whatever is left over outside building your career or working long hours or doing what you need to do is left for you. And it may only be 10% of burnout left out on the weekend, but that 10% is for you. Whereas when you've got children at home and babies and unpredictable nights and daycare germs and all of that, if you go back into the workplace with that same level of dedication, hard work, that usual routine, and you've only got that 10% left over, and that 10% is sucked dry. I know that sounds depressing. Exactly. It is
Yes.
such a massive crash landing. And so many of us, including me, it took me until the 3rd baby to realize I wasn't ever able to balance it. It takes us until we get to that crash landing of going, oh my God, I don't think I can work like this. And even though the burnout symptoms were there before, we could get through it. And it's in motherhood where we realize, oh, this isn't going to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just the absolute need to prioritize them, and then sort of juggling all the feelings and all the things with actually these things feel like they're now an equal priority.
Yeah.
Children need me, business needs me, clients need me. I need to put, if I don't do this, the money doesn't come in the door, etc. So it's when I think these things become an equal priority that actually it's essential that we go, okay, well, how's this going to work? How many hours am I going to spend on this, and how many hours am I going to spend on this, and how am I going to support both sides and in turn support me? And one of the things that really bothers me is when I see this reference to this language, which is work-life blend, because I see that as it's like permission for it all just to get really messy and try and work it out on the fly. And I actually think that is a recipe for disaster. I know that's a recipe for disaster, based on my work with my clients, based on my own experience. Like, we need the clarity of and the intentionality of what do you want this to look like for it to feel like balance to you.
Yes.
Your definition of balance, Amy, may be completely different to mine. Somebody on their first child might be completely different to mine on my second, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no right or wrong here, but what does a beautiful balanced life look like to you? How much do you want to work? And how much time do you want to spend? Do you want to go to assembly? Do you not want to go to assembly? Do you want to pick your child up from school? Do you not want to pick your child up from school? Like, no right or wrongs here, but, go into it with this intentionality around it. Make that your ideal definition of balance, so that then there's an alert or a trigger. Oh, hey, I didn't get to school pickup today. Oh, hey, I found myself scrapping to get, Maxie picked up by somebody else this week. Let me look at how this week unfolded so I can see why we ended up here and then make a choice whether actually am I okay. So for
Mm.
example, in my own world, my idea of balance is I work 24 hours a week. I work 4 6-hour days. So it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I have Fridays off with Bo. So that's where that's how I set it up, a couple of years ago. And my little triggers are if I'm not working nights, not working weekends, because I want to spend, evenings on the couch with my hubby and my brain doesn't function very well. And one of the ways I know if I feel like I'm in balance and on track is when Maxie gets in the door at 3:30 in the afternoon and races into my office, or Bo does. I'm not sort of going, oh, hang on, guys, I need a minute to just finish this off. I actually can turn to them and be like, hey, I'm done for the day. Now, I got to about the middle of last year and that wasn't happening. I was like, guys, I need a minute, hop in front of the TV. And I say this with absolutely no judgment to anybody who finds themselves in that situation. By me having this clarity of actually what an ideal life was like for me, I was therefore able to notice, this isn't happening. I was working nights. I wasn't, I was saying to Ian, hey, I need to record a podcast on the weekend, et cetera, et cetera. And so I got to just look at it and go, where's my time going? How do I feel about this? And do I need to shift something? So actually in the last couple of months, I now work Friday mornings. So I've hired in a babysitter to come and spend the mornings with Bo because I'm like, for this moment in time, this needs to shift.
Yes.
So it's not about, you're wrong, you're bad, you're breaking any your rules or anything like that. It's like, it just gave me this opportunity to be aware of it, to review it, and to choose again.
It sounds like it's almost we need regular audits of it. It's like, and I love the way that you say they're like, what are the triggers or the warning signs that the balance is out? I believe it was Annabelle Crabb. So if I've got this reference incorrect, someone I'm sure will let me know on Instagram. But I think it was Annabelle Crabb that speaks about work-life balance for women, for mothers, like a tightrope. And you're the tightrope walker. And balance looks like sometimes you have to tip to the left to actually stay on the tightrope. And then the next footstep, you tip in a little bit to the right. And the idea is that if you're just listening to the audio here, I'm doing very crazy sort of left and right sort of tipping movements here. She beautifully described in the way that I heard her say it was that we think balance is this straight line where it's always going to be balanced. It's always going to be perfect, 50 this and 50 that, always getting this bit right and this bit right. And she said, no, sometimes we tip too far to one way and we have to learn to catch ourselves before we fall off that tightrope. And I loved that idea that it's almost micro adjustments. But what you're saying is that we don't even know where those adjustments are needed if we don't give ourselves the time and the warning signs of that audit.
Absolutely. If we're not even aspiring for balance, then, we don't even know when the crash off the tightrope is coming.
Yeah.
Because if we've decided that, this is just all work-life blend and sometimes I'm going to be on the ground and sometimes I'm going to be up straight and sometimes I'm going to be off to the side and it doesn't matter because this is life, then, how long do you lie on the ground for before you go, this isn't very cool, is it?
So true.
So, yeah. I'm just go on, please.
So, because I'm always like, micro and macro thinking, it just frustrates me, Paula, that we are still in, we're now 2024. Women have been fighting for equality in the workplace for a number of decades now. We've been trying to become honest and clear about what we need to be successful in the workplace and happy in home. Why are we still so bloody stuck and unclear and unbalanced in this? It's so frustrating that it's still such a pressure point for women with young children, that this level of commitment that is needed at work and this level of commitment that we want at home is still so hard to find. It eludes so many of us.
And I think that what you've started to say is, in my opinion, I think we don't have enough examples to see how it's possible. I think that the male side of the coin is still catching up.
Yeah.
And I say that from the perspective of, I think there's a lot of people who want to catch up, but they're not seeing examples either. Like the number of conversations I've had with my husband, whereby who's a beautiful human being and actually
And
contributes a
he
lot.
is. I will attest to that.
He contributes a lot at home, but particularly in the early days when I'd be saying, I need you to do more, this, I can't carry this. He'd look at me and he'd sort of say, but compared to my mates, compared to, look how much I'm doing, and what it made me realize, like, when I was feeling kind towards him as opposed to angry in that moment, was it's like, you don't have any examples either. So
Beautiful.
actually we're all trying to work through this charted territory. So I'm like, yeah, cool. And so I guess, when there's more, and I guess there's more female entrepreneurs, there's more like leaders, there are more female leaders and whatnot existing, but they're not necessarily showing us an ideal way to operate. So, many of the very, very, very successful women that I know who've been entrepreneurs in corporate or, who entrepreneurs or roles in corporate, they haven't necessarily gotten there in a way that they think is great in hindsight. So I guess,
Very true. That is so true.
Absolutely. So, often these amazing women who are doing amazing things don't actually have an amazing life to match up to it. So I guess I think we're just moving through that messy path of actually working it out. And I'm hoping in 10 years' time, we're going to have so many more examples of, it's possible. Oh, look at that person. Let's follow that path and see if that works for us, et cetera, et cetera. And then the men will have more examples to draw on, et cetera. So I just think it's messy.
It is. And I'm so glad you talked about the fathers, the other partners, because, and this conversation comes up so many times. You hear it in the media all the time. Why do female politicians get asked about work-life balance, and nobody ever asks the male politicians about work-life balance as the father? That's if we're talking about real work-life balance, it has to be a question for every single person in the workplace, not just the mothers, right?
Absolutely.
That's one of the big problems. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a dad at school who took paternity leave and subsequently was made redundant. Exactly, in a very, specialist big job. And so, he and his wife were on that classic two very high achieving, two very high income, households. She took the first, 6 or 12 months off, and then he was like, cool, I'm happy to do this. And he got made redundant. And he point blank said to them, this feels really obvious to me.
Yeah.
And of course, it was denied left, right, and center. But it's like, well, so how are they being supported as well? So I think that, organizations are catching up, we're catching up, the guys are catching up. I just think this is messy transition.
I love this because actually last week on the podcast, I released an episode with Jeremy McVean, who is one of the creators and leads in a project called the Fatherhood. And his big passion is to go into workplaces and talk about making fatherhood more visible in the workplace. Because if we want to make real balance for the mothers, we have to make it for the fathers. And again, it was hard, Paula, not to do the slight ranty and he was fine with it. He's like, I'm used to this. But it was hard not to say to him when he was talking about the struggles fathers have in bravely making this visible in the workplace. It was hard not to say, yeah, welcome to our world for the last 50 years. But it's great that it's starting to be for both sides. I think that's actually what we need. It needs to be, fathers need to realize how hard it is to balance this so that then they will support their partners differently as well.
Absolutely.
So if a mama was listening to this and either is getting ready to go back to work, because we have a huge community of women who listen to this on maternity leave or while they're pregnant, and really trying to envisage what this would look like, either stepping back into their own business or working for someone else. If you were to, I don't know, design, because this is what you're so good at, like getting clear on values, putting a plan in place, having tough conversations, checking in with it, whether it's working. It's what you've taught me how to do in my business, and I know this is what you do. If a mama was either feeling like it wasn't balanced right now or is about to go and have those conversations with her workplace. Where do we start in trying to understand what would this look like for me? What I'm wondering is, I think there's an element of it because it changes so often with children. There's an element of you'll need to just kind of hazard a guess of what work-life balance will look like at first. But then also you may have 3 months of the flu cycle, followed by the gastro cycle, followed by the whatever else cycle. So I want to preface this by saying I think part of it has to be constant audits, like we said,
Mm.
and checking in with what's working this week because kids are so unpredictable. But if there was a bit of a way for us to start preparing for this, where would we start?
I think two things. If you're planning about what it's going to look like when you go back after having your first child, I think the first thing to keep in mind is that it's never going to look the same. It's different.
Amen.
It's not the same. So your aspiration cannot be for you to be able to produce the same, be as committed, be the person before. So I think that's the first thing, is that you need to sit with you have a new normal. And then I think secondly, what you alluded to is the best laid plan is unlikely to happen because we have this very, very crazy variable now in the mix, which doesn't buy into your planning. So I think that actually, when a heavy, structured, planned out way probably worked for you really well in the past, there needs to be flexibility built in going forward. And so I think that, whether you're in the situation now or you're thinking about how you'll handle it, it's to sit there and think, well, what would ideal look like? What if I could choose and I gave myself permission to dream big, and I've got my eyes closed for everybody listening? It's like, what actually would it look like? Would I finish at 3? Would I do school pickups? Would I do kindy pickups? Would there be daycare? Would there not be daycare? Would I have a nanny working here with me at home? Would I actually just have my mum, a couple of hours in the morning because that's all I'm comfortable with? Like, just to sit there and actually go, if I gave myself permission to dream big. And I think we need to circle back to that a couple of times, because the first, answer your brain will give will probably be the one that's laid with what society says you should have done or what somebody else has done or what, the shoulds.
Mm-hmm.
And
Bingo.
then sit there and really go, but actually, if I could dream. So, referring to my experience, when I had my first little boy, Maxie, I had a business. And what felt good and safe to me was having a nanny at home with us. And the first nanny we hired, I sat in my office and cried while she was outside with the baby for the first couple of hours. And I didn't love her and I just didn't get a good vibe. And I had to sit with that going, okay, well, I need to deal with this because this is not ideal. So I had to go and have that awkward conversation and let her go and go back to square one and go, okay. And it would have been really easy to be like, it's fine. And so then, I went and eventually found Mary Poppins, which was incredible. And she became part of our family for 4 years. And so I was like, okay, this is working for me. So then my choice was, I will flex the amount I can work around her schedule because it gives me the safety and the security and the things that I've deemed I need. And so, that was what felt good to me until I was ready to put him into daycare and et cetera, et cetera. And then with Bo, when Bo came along, we couldn't find the amazing Mary Poppins nanny. So again, I had to sit with, well, what's ideal look like if I can't get absolute dream Mary Poppins in my pocket because damn her for graduating and becoming a teacher in a school.
Doesn't she have a younger sister or something?
Right. And so then we're sort of sitting with, okay, and actually our current model is both my husband and I work 4 days each, and one of us, we have Bo. So I have Bo on a Friday, he has Bo on a Thursday. And so that's what is right for both of us. So we both flex back our work because, that was the choices and that's what felt great to us. And so then within that, when I go, okay, well, he's going to daycare, I feel safe, that feels good. Then it's like, well, I could, put him for 8 hours in daycare. So I could do 6 hours of work. Here's 2 hours for me. And that became important as well.
I was just about to bring that up because I know you would have found this too in your work over the years, but I've coached so many mums over the years who have ended up taking just a tiny bit more daycare than they needed for work for themselves and feel terribly guilty about that. You know, they're
Yeah.
only working 3 days a week, but they put the baby in for 4 days a week, or maybe they only work 2 days and they put it in for 3. So on that third day, they have what I think is the true definition of balance. But then they
Mm,
fill that balance day, that self day up with the groceries, the shopping, the appointments,
mm,
the cleaning. And that's not balance either. There's
mm,
some beautiful, I think it's Kate Toon who talks about you have to show your kids that what it
mm,
looks like to run a house. Don't pick them up late from daycare so you can go do the grocery shopping. I mean, obviously, if your kid screams in the supermarket and you just want to shop alone, then go for it. But so often we use those precious little hours, Paula, that are meant to be so we could breathe, or maybe
mm,
even go on a date with our partner, go out for lunch with a
mm.
girlfriend, sit on the beach with a book. We use that to do all the other mother tasks and then don't have any balance. So I think that's a really important equation here as well.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with the concept that we need to teach
Mm.
our children to expect to see this. So one of
Yes.
our family rituals is on a Saturday morning, we go to the gym because they've got a creche. And arguably my 7, almost 8-year-old is a little bit old to be going into the creche at the gym. But I sit there and say to him, mate, this is mummy's time. This is
I
what we
love
have to
that.
do. Because later on we're going to go to soccer and this and that. And I know you don't love it in here. And I know there's a lot of babies, but and I've had this conversation a few times. It wasn't just a once
I
once and
bet.
done. Because I don't want to go to the gym. It's boring. It's babies. It's this and that. I don't kind of blah blah blah. And I'm like, cool. And this is mummy's hour. So can we do it together?
But also, I would
Oh,
argue, mummy doesn't want to go sit on the side of the soccer field for an hour afterwards. So that's what I would be saying. Be like, you think I love
100%.
doing the soccer?
Totally, totally. And even the creche has got not the creche, the gym has got a little coffee shop. So sometimes Ian and I go together, my husband and I go together, and we stay and we have a coffee for 15 minutes afterwards.
Mm.
And it's just grabbing that moment for us. We've had our hour in the gym, we take the 15 minutes to have coffee, and now we go back to the kids, and we have to explain that to them. This is why we're doing it, because we need this too. And then we go off to your thing, and then we go off to your thing. So I think that if we don't see it and explain it, like I can't remember my mum ever saying that, showing that, or doing that. Like my mum was very much, I think the generation and certainly her family where it's like put everybody else first,
Mm.
resent them for it quietly,
Yeah.
hope that somebody's going to give you something back,
Or
and if it
notice what
doesn't
you
just happen
do and
by
say thank you.
that's right. And if it doesn't happen by osmosis, then, get sadder and sadder. So
That's it.
yes.
One of my greatest memories as a kid, we grew up so far away from any family support. I see my mum very differently now than I did when I was younger. Now I understand. We lived, completely interstate from all family support. So my sister and I were always doing everything with her. So every Thursday, late night shopping, we had to go do the grocery shopping with my mum every
Yeah.
Thursday. Even as a teenager, we'd have to go do grocery shopping with my mum on a Thursday night and hated it, lamented it,
Yeah.
worst thing in the world. One of my greatest memories now, Paula, is my sister, my mum, and I doing Thursday night shoppings. Like,
Yeah.
I think we get ourselves tied up, and this comes back to that concept which we teach so much in Mama Rising, and it's through everything that I do, of this good mother theory
Mm,
of what it means to be a good mother. And a good mother is already organized when she gets to the school gates. And a good mother already has the fridge full of food and the house is already clean and they don't need to, we have these distorted images. But I would argue we also have a successful woman stereotype. So we
yes.
have this idea of what it means to be a good mother. But then we also have this idea of what it means to be a successful woman. And that would be she works this many hours. She's always on top of things. She answers her emails within 24 hours or whatever it is that you have held yourself to, usually
Mm,
before kids. And
mm,
both of those are impractical and neither of them can work with the other one. And so that's, to me, when I think about work-life balance, it's like successful woman and good mother balance. It's break down what it really is to be successful and break down what it really means to be a good mother. And then you probably get somewhere in the middle. And that's what we're trying to do here, is not try and be superwoman in all of these different roles.
Because ultimately, the happiest mother and the happiest, employee is the one who outperforms and everybody gets the most from.
Yeah.
So, and I think if you had to put on a scale, a happy person versus somebody who hit every single goal, I really think that the external choice would be the happy person.
Yes.
And certainly from a performance perspective, it's the happy person who just is more engaging, et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah. Before we finish up, because I think this is also, like I said before, one of your special talents is like difficult conversations. One of the things that I think is so hard for women, whether you're in your own business or working for someone else, is to make motherhood visible. What I mean by that is we're so afraid of being judged as not being productive or professional because we're mothers that we often don't refer to being a mother, or we don't explain what's really going on. It's one of my passions, but I'm not very good at it, that to try and not apologize for having to move things because one of my kids is sick, or pretend that there's something else going on when actually it's just because we've had 3 weeks of illness or whatever it is, to bravely own that this is where I am in my life and this is how I'm having to manage it, instead of apologizing or hiding it. I think that's really hard for women, especially, I was going to say especially in corporate. I'm going to take that back. I think for all of us, if we are wanting to have a conversation, maybe with our partner, maybe with our colleagues, how can we, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but how do we do this? How do we say, this is what I need for balance and success and productivity, without apologizing or feeling ashamed that it's because we're mothers? Sorry to put you on the spot. It's a tough question.
No. I think that part of the breakdown is the attachment to the way something is done to get to the result. So if we think of before we even shifted to remote working, there was a thought process that you needed to be at your desk from 9 to 5 to be seen to be doing the things to get the result. Okay, so this terrible pandemic has forced our thinking to shift to actually you can still get to the same result without having to commute, without having to be sitting next to somebody, without having to be monitored, blah blah blah. So I think
that's true.
If we think of, know that whether you're sitting there as an employee or as a business owner, shift your thinking to the result, and then get curious about the attachment that somebody has to the way we get to that. And one of my favorite sayings is, be curious rather than furious. So we take our furious hat off and we put our curious hat on. And so, for example, if you're asking to be able to work from home one day a week, or you're considering that as a business owner yourself, thinking, perhaps I'm offline for a week, or maybe I'm unavailable to my team for the week, rather than being attached to but we're normally online, this person normally emails me in the morning, blah, 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 go, what are you actually concerned about here? So what are we focusing on? What do we need to achieve? What do you need from me? What do you need me to produce? And now let's chat about and explore your concern that you have around me shifting the way I get there.
That's
because
right.
From a corporate perspective, we've all got KPIs, we've all got minimum targets that we need to achieve in our jobs. And, as business owners as well, ultimately we're trying to get to certain things. So it's like if we're trying to change the way that happens, which is what we need, flexible working, if I need to go to school assembly, I need to pick the person up, so-and-so sick, et cetera, it's like, I think that it's a pattern of, but if you don't do this, then my brain's jumping forward to it means we won't get this result.
Yes.
And so it's a conversation about, and whether it's trust or whether it's just nervousness because it's new or whatever. But again, let's get curious rather than furious. why are we assuming, or what are you concerned about that makes you think the result is not going to happen if we change the method to get there?
Oh, that's it. Yes. And if you can help whoever you're having a conversation with see that the result will still be there, then the method is more flexible. It's like focusing on that. Yes, I will still get there, but
Absolutely.
this is what I need to get there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I
And
love
just
that.
questioning. So
Yes.
rather than defending or presenting your case or feeling like it's all on your shoulders, let's share with me your concerns. What are you nervous about here? What are you worried about? So if I work 2 days from home, what are you worried about?
Yeah.
From that very empathetic perspective of curiosity. Oh, because you'll miss the team meetings, you'll miss the little conversations that happen in the office. You won't be here for our 9 o'clock stand up. Okay, I get that. So if we were to have those on certain days, and I was only home on the days when that, etc., etc. So can you solve the underlying concern that the person has, that they're linking to the likelihood of you not delivering the result.
Wow. That has really shifted that for me. I really love the way that you've said that. It also helps, I hope, the ones that are listening who are in that situation recognize their own fear of the judgment that the others will be having as well. So if you go in there saying, I know that they might have these worries, but I'm going to focus on the result, then you'll get there with them as well. Because I think so often we're worried about what they might be thinking about us now that I'm a mum. Because we know that there's unconscious and conscious bias towards pregnant women, and we know that that happens in the workplace. So it might be there, but let's be curious around what it is they're really worried about and address that. It's so huge. It's such, like I said before, I think we could be frustrated that it is still such a challenge to find balance, true balance in these years of early motherhood. But I do think we're getting closer, and the conversations are getting better between partners in particular, as well as workplaces. So, thank you so much, beautiful. As always, I love our chats and love your brain, the way it works.
My absolute pleasure. I think we're getting there. I don't think we're there, but I think we're getting there, and I certainly think we're heading in the right direction and we're on the right path. And for that, I'm grateful and I'm encouraging, and let's just see where we end up.
Exactly.
Keep going.
Let's keep going. Exactly. And I'm going to pop in the show notes all that you do, especially for women in business and entrepreneurs and mothers in business. Please have a look at what Paula does. You have stepped in and guided me through big changes in my team and in the size and growth of my business at a couple of key moments in my life. So yes, everyone, please have a look at what she does. And thank you, beautiful. Hope to see you in person soon.
Pleasure.
Yay.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, as always, for being a part of our global matrescence community. Please take a moment and make sure you're subscribed to this podcast in your podcast player so you can always be notified of our next episode. And if you would like to work with a coach on your own experience of matrescence, please go to mamarising.net and explore our directory of phenomenal coaches, workshop leaders, space holders and facilitators around the globe. You can also explore our Global Matrescence Foundation and consider donating so a mama in need can access the support of one of our coaches and still ensure that our coaches receive the income and support they need so they can continue to work in this way. And finally, if you would like to be a coach, a facilitator and a matrescence activist in your own community, jump on our waitlist for our next intake of the Mama Rising Facilitator Training at mamarising.net. Thank you for being here and being part of this movement. Until next week, bye.